This is Cruise Radio.
I cruise a lot, and I always sail with travel insurance. You should too. Get a free quote today at tripinsurance.com.
Here we go.
Broadcasting from the tripinsurance.com studios in Jacksonville, Florida. This is Cruise Radio.
Hey, how's it going? My name is Doug Parker. Thank you so much for checking out this episode of Cruise Radio. Very happy to have you here, my friend. A review of Norwegian Escape today, and staff writer Richard Sims on deck with cruise news. Right to him now. Hey, Richard.
Hey, Doug.
So we start with news that caught a lot of people by surprise.
I was one of them. I was scrolling through Instagram, and suddenly a post came up with Captain Kate revealing that after 22 years, she is leaving Celebrity Cruises. Now, Captain Kate, I'm sure captains come and go all the time, but Captain Kate has become sort of the most famous captain since, Stubing or Captain Kangaroo or Captain Crunch. I mean, she's right up there. Cruisers know Captain Kate. Over the course of the 22 years she's worked for Celebrity, she's worked on 11 ships within the Royal Caribbean group. Although, for my money, I think it was as captain of Celebrity Beyond that she really blossomed into sort of the person we all know and love. That's, she really became kind of an internet sensation, but, her and her late that's a cat, Captain Bug. As to why she's leaving, Kate said, and I'm quoting here, "Simply put, life has an incredible way of reminding us what's important and changing up priorities. I've recently had some big life changes, and this just happens to be one of those." She went on to say that she definitely is not done with life on the high seas because, and again, I'm quoting here, I love this quote, "I have too much salt in my veins to leave the sea behind." On a personal note, I'm kind of saddened by this because sailing with Captain Kate was kind of a bucket list thing for me. I am such a fan of hers that I really wanted to sail on a ship with her and hopefully have a chance to meet her, maybe chat with her, because she's very good at mingling with the guests and she kind of realizes that she is this icon in the cruise industry. So hopefully she'll wind up on another ship at some point and I'll still have the chance to, get to meet her.
Yeah, I always thought it was interesting, like when I was on a cruise ship and Carnival's brand ambassador John Heald was on there because it was like a rock star. People were following him and everything. And then I was on that first return to cruise sailing for Celebrity in 2021, post-shutdown. And Captain Kate was walking around the ship and people were all over her. I'm like, this makes John Heald look like just an everyday Joe cruising.
Which is not easy to do because John Heald, like Captain Kate, is one of those people who, cruisers know. Mm-hmm. And what's interesting to me is that I think John Heald is known basically in the Carnival world.
Yeah.
Whereas I think Captain Kate is known kind of beyond that. She's been featured in commercials. Mm-hmm. She does really cool stuff. Like she's a mermaid. She loves putting on a mermaid tail and swimming. And she's just really become someone who even non-cruisers kind of know who she is. So I can't wait to see what's next for her.
And it looks like we have yet another gastro outbreak.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on, but it feels as if we've been reporting a new outbreak every week lately. And I guess maybe we have because this is the 8th outbreak this year. And so how many weeks into the year are we? Right around there. So this time, it's 79 passengers and 9 crew members who are on board the Holland America Eurodam, and this was during a 10-night Caribbean cruise. Like I said, this is the 8th outbreak this year to reach the level required that it be reported to the CDC, and 3 of the 8 were on Holland America ships. Now, this is where I remind everybody that while, the general public thinks of cruise ships as being a haven for neurovirus, actually only 1% of all neurovirus cases take place on ships. But it's also why cruise ships pay people to stand outside the buffet and sing vaguely offensive songs like "Washy Washy" to get people to, you are in an enclosed environment, so you do need to sort of have a heightened sense of making sure that things are clean, making sure you're following good hygiene. Yeah, so this is like I said, the 8th case this year. Hopefully we'll see this trend going down.
And this week saw Carnival Cruise Line sharing a bit of news that I pretty much know for a fact, Richard, you won't like this.
No, I was not happy. But at the same time, I also wasn't terribly surprised. So A Carnival Cruise Line passenger asked brand ambassador John Heald, who we were just speaking about a few minutes ago, they asked him if Carnival planned on joining kind of the rest of the modern cruise industry by adding solo staterooms. Okay, they didn't put it quite like that, but they might as well have. And while nearly every major cruise line has realized that there are more and more solo cruisers exploring the world each year, Heald said that at this point, Carnival doesn't have any plans to roll out solo cabins. Like I said, as disappointing as this is to a lot of people, it's not terribly surprising. Carnival is a brand that is very family forward. They, advertise themselves as being the number one family cruise line. And so while I think that even though they could charge a pretty good rate for a solo cabin, they're like, you know what? We can charge you double and put you in a regular cabin. Like I said, this is really kind of going against the grain of what's happening in the rest of the industry. Solo cruising is definitely on the rise. Norwegian is probably best known among solo cruisers because they really go out of their way. They have the solo staterooms. They now have solo balconies, which have in the past been very hard to find. Usually solo cruisers who were able to find a solo rate or a solo stateroom were relegated to inside staterooms. But Norwegian really changed all that. So, as of right now, if you're a solo traveler and you want to sail on Carnival, you either have to look for a really good rate or be willing to pay the double supplement, because that is what all the pricing on their ships is typically based on.
10 years ago, Christine Duffy joined Carnival Cruise Line, and I had a chance to interview her. It was like her first week on the job, and it was her and I sitting on this shuttle van from the hotel to the Galveston cruise port. That's one of the questions I asked her. This was back in 2015. I was like, why does Carnival not have solo pricing? She said, just like what you said, but I'm paraphrasing here. She said, we have a family model where we try to fill rooms to more than just two people a room. So I totally get that.
Yeah, of course. It makes sense. It works for them. It works for them. And, it's not as if solo cruisers can't cruise. It's not like solo cruisers can't cruise with Carnival. I've done it. I booked a few years ago, when I did Mardi Gras, I booked the most expensive suite on Mardi Gras. I think it was if not the biggest, it was certainly the second biggest. It was when I had that great balcony with the hot tub on it and a huge room, and I paid full price for it. The moral of the story is, if you want to do something, you're going to pay for it, and if you don't want to pay for it, then you look for a different option. You look somewhere that does sort of cater to your specific needs.
Now, on occasion, I have seen Carnival, and this might be just more than occasion, but like when I've booked transatlantic cruises and such on those, I have seen, instead of 2X, I've seen 1.75. Have you ever seen that, or 1.5?
Definitely.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I do when I'm looking at rates, now I almost never book a solo stateroom. I've done it a couple times. I did it on Anthem of the Seas. I've done it on one or two others. But I usually just book a normal stateroom. But I do try and find good pricing. And one of the ways I do that is there's a really cool site called cruiseplum.com. It's cruiseplum.com. And you can search on that site they have a specific setting where you can search for solo rates. You can search for discount rates. You can search for last minute deals. It sounds like a paid promo. It's not. It's just a site that I really, really like. And I go there at least once a week and look and see, okay, what solo deals are out there. So if you look, you can find them. And that includes on Carnival. It's just, you're going to be a little less likely to be able to find it on Carnival.
And passengers on one Princess ship experienced quite the moment or two this week.
Yeah, it was the Crown Princess, and they were sailing through the Milford Sound in Fiordland, New Zealand. Now, I know nothing about this area. I've never been there. But Doug, am I right that this is kind of a notoriously, almost like Drake Passage? It can get some bad weather up in there?
Yeah, a lot of crosswinds.
Okay, and that's basically what happened. They were sailing in this area on Tuesday, and the ship was buffeted by strong winds that caused the ship to list more than usual. Or, as Princess put it in a statement, quote, "The ship briefly tilted beyond its usual movement before stabilizing," which doesn't sound scary, but if you're on a ship and suddenly it kind of lists more than just a little bit, like when you're in regular waves, I have to imagine that for a lot of people, especially like people who grew up on the Poseidon Adventure, you're suddenly like, oh my God, we're going to be upside down and I'm going to have to climb to the bottom of the boat to survive. But, it was not that big a deal. The alarms went off and the pool flooded a little bit of a dining area. 13 passengers and 3 crew members suffered minor injuries, but there was no serious damage, no serious injuries, the ship didn't sustain any structural damage and it continued on its way. I have no doubt that there are probably posts on social media where they've made it, seem like, oh my God, we were hit by a rogue wave, but it really was not that big a deal. But I think whenever something like this happens and a cruise line knows that like there are going to be people on social media talking about it, they address it, which is smart. Get out ahead of the story, make sure that people know, yeah, this happened. It wasn't a big deal. We had no damage. A few people were minorly injured. But I'm sure for those on board, there was a moment or two where it was, a little bit scary.
And I do want to say before we move here, thank you to Kim. She actually emailed this story to tips@cruiseradio.net. And I do want to extend because our next story also came from the tip line that if you do have a tip for us, tips@cruiseradio.net. We can research it, get a statement and all that stuff. And actually, Jose sent this next story in, Richard, which is a first for 2025 and not a good one.
No, but we got this far. We're almost to the end of February and we have our first man overboard story of 2025. So far, as we're recording it, it does not seem to have a happy ending, and that is usually the case when people go overboard off a ship. This time, the Uruguayan and Brazilian authorities are searching for a missing crew member who went overboard on the MSC Posia. Authorities said that a 32-year-old Filipino national went overboard after the ship left Montevideo on Friday. They were able to use surveillance video to figure out where he was last seen and about what point he went into the water. So there was of course, immediately a search went into effect. But as of now, we are recording this on Wednesday afternoon. And as of now, we've had no update as to whether that person was found or not. It seems, I feel like when you watch, true crime stories, they always talk about how when a person goes missing, meaning on land, the first 24 to 48 hours are crucial in the investigation. And I feel like that's very true in these type of situations at sea as well, that, if they don't pretty quickly find and get that person out of the water, it typically does not have a good positive ending. But we will certainly keep the man and his loved ones in our thoughts and hope for the best.
And listener question this week comes from Mary. You can email yours in, Doug@cruiseradio.net. Mary says, I'm a first-time cruiser and stopping in Freeport where I've read mixed reviews. The question is, in your opinion, should I stay on the ship or go explore?
Well, I hate to diss any port, but I will say that Freeport is not the most exciting of ports. Yes, I've been there twice. Once I got off, once I stayed on the ship. There are plans to expand Freeport and build some like hotels and resorts and stuff like that. And I think if you ask this same question 2 years from now, it will be a completely different answer. I think it's a lot like with Nassau, where just a couple years ago, Nassau was definitely a feel free to stay on the ship kind of port. But now, thanks to the renovations they've done, it's actually, I've become one of my favorite ports down there. So I would, you're a first-time cruiser, which means you've never been. And I'm like, go ahead, explore. You've never been here. See, you might like it. You might enjoy some of the crappy shops available. But yeah, if you ended up getting there and the weather was bad and you were like, oh, am I going to feel like I missed something if I stay on the ship? No, you're not going to miss anything. So, like I said, as a first-time cruiser, it's worth checking out. But I don't think on your second cruise, you will probably be all that motivated to get off.
Yeah, I was going to say, for us who have been there quite a bit, we usually just do stay on the ship because you have like the Port Lakayan Marketplace, you have a couple of beaches, and you don't have a lot to do besides shopping and beaches there in Freeport.
And bars.
Oh, yeah, bars too, of course. And of course, there's some places in the port area as well. So, like, if it's your first time cruising or even your first time out of the country, why not go ashore, even if you just hang out in the port area? But it also is, in defense, it's also a good chance for those who do stay on the ship to actually treat the ship as a sea day where there are fewer crowds.
Right. It's a great opportunity. They usually, on port days, you can usually get some decent value in the spa. You can maybe get a lunch that you wouldn't normally have. I'm a big fan of staying on the ship when we're in certain ports, and that is one of them. But again, the first time I was there, I was definitely all about like, hey, I'm going to get off the ship and explore everywhere because I want to be able to say that I have been there.
All right. Very nice. Staff writer Richard Sims, as always, thank you, my friend.
Thank you, Doug.
The world is constantly changing. Your place for news is still the same. Online and on demand at cruiseradio.net.
A big question we get at Cruise Radio is, how do I know if I need trip insurance? Simple answer. If you're getting on a plane, taking a road trip, or getting on a cruise ship, you need to have travel insurance. Hey, it's Doug Parker from my friends at tripinsurance.com. Not only does tripinsurance.com protect your vacation investment, but it also gives you peace of mind in case anything were to go wrong on your trip. How do they do it? They offer 3 different types of trip insurance policies. Good, better, and best. One policy for every vacation budget. But it doesn't just stop there. They're up to 40% lower when you shop around on other comparison sites. Plus, tripinsurance.com offers 24-hour customer support before, during, and after your trip, online claims assistance, and travel alerts to let you know what's going on at your destination. But find out for yourself. Check out tripinsurance.com.
Have a tip or a lead on a news story? Let us know. Email tips@cruiseradio.net.
John just returned from an 8-night cruise aboard Norwegian Cruise Line's Norwegian Escape. It was a Florida-Bahamas cruise, and he joins us to talk all about it. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing very well, Doug. How are you?
Good, bud. So last time we talked, you were sailing all out of the West Coast. Now you're East Coast, New York City. So we'll take a step back here. What made you want to sail this 8-nighter on Norwegian Escape?
So my partner and I are teachers in the Westchester County area, and we have a winter break in February, and we were seeking warm weather. And we like the convenience of being able to sail out of our home port in Manhattan. We cruised Norwegian before, had a good experience on the Prima, so we thought we would give the Escape a try. We went with our 2 other friends, both of whom are retired teachers, and I'm happy to report back on this experience because it was quite different from our experience on the Prima.
I know you live in New York, but you make your way to the cruise terminal. Any pre-cruise time in the city before you boarded?
No, we frequent the city a lot. So we just, drove in the morning, actually drove in later in the afternoon. Our departure was delayed, actually. The ship came up from Florida totally empty of passengers. I'm not quite sure why that was. So we had a fairly late boarding time. So we left our apartment in Westchester around like 2:00, just took an Uber down, took about 35 minutes, and we were there at the port. So didn't really spend any time in the city.
How long did it take you from the curb to the ship? And I know that embarkation can be hit or miss there in Manhattan. How was it for y'all?
I am so glad you asked that, Doug, because I finally remembered this time to actually start a stopwatch and time it. And it clocked in at 51 minutes.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, which, is not the worst.
Mm-hmm.
But it was, so here's what it was. We spent probably a good 35 to 40 of those 51 minutes in the security line. It was moving very slowly, and it seemed that there was some kind of a hang up or something, because after about, again, those 30 and 35 minutes, like a miracle, everything just started moving quickly, and we're through security, and then the rest of the check-in process was a breeze. So I'm not sure what was happening at security, but whatever it was seemed to resolve. And then after that, just practically, we walked right up to the check-in desk, we got our key cards, and walked right on the ship.
So you mentioned that this was your first time sailing this class of ship, but you've sailed Norwegian Prima before. So what were your first impressions walking on board Norwegian Escape?
So as I believe is common on Norwegian ships, you don't enter into like a main thoroughfare or like an atrium or something like that. You walk into a stairwell and then just kind of like disperse from one of the stairwells. First impressions were mostly good. It's such the Prima is such an, I think, like a drastic aesthetic departure from the Escape. And I assume that probably applies to the rest of the breakaway class ships. It is very 2015.
Mm-hmm.
And as stupid and as obvious as that sounds, of course, the ship was built in 2015, but it has a certain. I don't know. Let me say this diplomatically and delicately. It is of its time.
Mm-hmm.
It is of its time. It definitely is reminiscent of a 2015 kind of, hotel style. First impression seemed, very, very comfortable. It was spotless. The crew had a lot of time to, take care of the minutia, the cleaning, and all of those things. So just from a cleanliness perspective, everything, smelled very fresh and was very clean and bright and sparkling and polished. So no complaints there.
I'm curious, you say of its time. Is it just because it's very boxy feeling, whereas Prima has no real straight lines and everything kind of just curves into each other?
Yes, that's exactly what it is. You hit the nail on the head. I was searching for the right way to describe it. But I sense that the trend in ship design these days is much more toward the open and the airy, right? Sort of like bringing the outside in, lots of, like organic shapes and curved lines and that I think is much more where the design trend in cruising is going. Whereas this is much more, shopping mall sounds kind of almost disparaging. It's that I don't mean it to be that way, but it's just very much boxy.
Yeah,
to borrow your word. Yes,
fair
boxy,
enough.
a little bit more compartmentalized. Which I can talk about a little later how that sort of like impacts the flow of passengers. I don't mean to say necessarily that it is dated. Like it doesn't feel like it's in poor condition or like it's run down. I wouldn't even say that like overall it is a bad aesthetic design. It just feels, it feels like a bit of a contrast from what the industry is sort of like evolving toward in terms of design and passenger flow and sort of the overall ethos of the public spaces.
That's fair. What kind of stateroom did you book for this 8-night sailing, and what did you think of it?
We booked a standard balcony, and we really enjoyed it. We found it to be stylish and cozy. I really liked the warm wood accents. Everything was very functional. The one thing that I can say about it, and it's just like a slight criticism, and I guess it's really down to preference, but I realized that I prefer a cabin configuration in which the storage and the closets are next to the sofa. Because in our cabin, the closets were directly up against the bed, and it just made kind of like navigating that space a little bit tight, especially when we were packing and unpacking. My partner and I were kind of stepping over each other to utilize that space. But otherwise, very clean, not a speck of dust, very comfortable. Balcony was a good size. Unfortunately, for reasons I will get into, weather-related reasons, we did not get very much use of it. But still, lovely outdoor space to pop out and get some fresh air and take in what little sunlight we were able to get.
And this one, so there's only, if I'm trying to visualize this in my head, so you're walking in the cabin and then you pass the bathroom and like a 90-degree turn, there's the closet up against the bed, basically like, 2 feet away.
Yes,
okay.
That is correct. Yes.
Interesting. You mentioned with it being, a 2015 ship, how modernized was the stateroom there for plugs and everything?
I did not find it to be an issue. I think what they did was they retrofitted some bedside light fixtures that have the USB ports. Unfortunately, they're the older ones. So if you're planning on charging your phone bedside, you may need to bring an adapter for that. I like to unplug on during my time at sea, so that wasn't really a problem. I just left my phone on the desk with the by the regular, plugged into the regular outlet, and that was perfectly fine for me. But if you are the person who goes to bed and wakes up with your phone by your side, just make sure that you either have like the old USB port or bring an adapter.
Gotcha. So let's talk about the food on board Norwegian Escape. We'll start at the buffet area, which is the Garden Cafe. How was the food there through the sailing, and did it ever feel congested at any time?
Oh my goodness gracious. Yes. Okay. So I don't mean for this to be like a largely negative review. because I do. But listen, I'll put it this way: I will answer your question, but I'm going to preface a little bit by saying that if it starts to seem like I'm just kind of like wearing on with complaints here, just please know I had a fabulous time. When you have a small army of people who are cooking and cleaning for you, it is very, very difficult to have a bad time. Mm-hmm. However, one of my important takeaways is that I will probably not sail on a ship that has anything less than like a 35 square foot per passenger ratio, because you feel that nowhere more so than in that buffet. That garden cafe, my goodness. And I lived in New York City for 2 years. So, I mean, I've been in crowded subways, buses, like you name it, elevators. And even that gave me like a sense of dread and anxiety. With that said, though, it was rarely ever difficult to find a seat. Mm-hmm. We were a traveling party of 4 and we always found it. Sometimes we had to search for a table, but usually not for very long, especially if we were heading aft. There were usually several open tables overlooking the wake, which is very nice. I would say the quality of the food, for buffet food, it was not bad. Mm-hmm. Curiously, nobody can make a decent French fry on that ship, which I think for me is kind of a benchmark. I know people have like certain culinary benchmarks, like, if you like try their boiled egg, try their poached egg, that's usually indicative of like, the rest of the culinary experience and whatnot. For us, it was the French fries. We could not get a good French fry. However, I thought that there was enough variety in what was offered to please most people. We certainly never had any trouble finding anything to eat. We thought overall the quality was decent. The fruit was fresh and crisp and, never had like wilted lettuce or anything. The meat was fine.
When this ship debuted, it had a Margaritaville type restaurant, then it transitioned to American Diner. Did you have a chance to go there?
I did, yes. So towards the middle of our trip, when we had some warmer weather, I did go out there because they have like a little breakfast buffet, a very, very limited breakfast buffet with just like some pastries and toast and some fruit. But it was a nice place to sit and have coffee. Not very crowded at all. It is definitely still the Margaritaville at sea theme. There's nothing American really or diner about it. But a really nice place on a warm sea day, especially in the morning, to just drink some coffee and take in the scenery.
Now, did NCL make this venue included in the price of the cruise now?
As far as I know, yes. Yeah. We did not go there for lunch, which I understand is a sit-down like table service kind of arrangement. And I don't know if they charge for that. I did not get the impression that they did, but we never experienced it. So, but for the breakfast buffet, it was completely complimentary.
And then outside of the buffet area and American Diner, let's talk about the quote unquote main dining rooms, I guess, experience here where you have 3 rooms. Does this one have 3 rooms, 3 main dining rooms, or just one?
It does, yes. So there is the Manhattan room, which is open seating, and then taste and they're all open seating. What am I talking about? This is NCL.
Right.
The Manhattan room, from what I understand, is only open for dinner, and then Taste and Savor are sort of like the adjunct restaurants that are open for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Gotcha.
So how was your experience in there through your evenings?
So we ate at the Manhattan room for main dining every night that we did the main dining. We got there right when it opened at 5:00. Never had any trouble getting a table. We very quickly bonded with our server. Her name is Ruby. Ruby, if you're listening, you were definitely the highlight of that trip. Even though they do the freestyle dining and the open seating, we found that if we just got there when they opened and asked the maitre d' if we could be seated in her section, they were happy to do that. And we're always happy to see her every night. She was a consummate professional, very warm, just lovely, very friendly. Really was one of the highlights of the trip. The food quality I would describe as okay. Let me be honest here without again being too much of a negative Nancy. Aggressively mediocre is the way that I might describe it. Which was kind of a stark contrast from our experience on the Prima. Now I understand that the Prima, when we sailed it 2 years ago, was brand new, and that's where company was clearly investing a lot of their money and resources. However, you expect a consistency among ships in a cruise line. And what we found in the main dining room on the Prima was that while none of the food was like especially, exotic or spectacular, it wasn't like haute cuisine or whatever. It was just like a lot of your basics and staples just done, really well. Like your steak was a decent cut of meat. It was well salted, well seasoned. The vegetables were of a good quality. The lettuce was very crisp, and you got like your Caesar dressing with fresh Parmesan cheese. Just like mastering the basics and getting those well. So you never felt like the like a situation where they'd overpromised and underdelivered. Our experience in the Manhattan room on the Escape was just it was again aggressively mediocre and kind of underwhelming. The tough cuts of meat, steaks with very minimal seasoning, like just lacking in like basics like salt, desserts that were kind of sad. I had a pork belly one night that was so overcooked and dry and basically inedible. And it creates like, a little bit of awkwardness because like your serving staff, like they notice when you're not eating something. It creates like that little bit of, discomfort, like, oh, are you not enjoying that? And like, I don't want to say yes, like I hate this. It's awful. Just, that sort of thing. But again, looking on the bright side, the food was always hot.
Yeah.
And did not seem to have been kept hot under a heat lamp. So that was a plus. Yeah, we were just expecting a little bit more. But no complaints about the service.
All right. Did you hit up any specialty restaurants?
We did, yes. So we got the more at sea package. So it included 2 evenings in specialty restaurants. The first one we did was teppanyaki, which I would say is probably more entertaining than it is appetizing. Not that the food was bad. The food was fine. We had, of course, the chef was very engaging and just delightful. My partner and I seemed to enjoy it than our other traveling partners a little bit more. I think where my primary niggle with the specialty dining on board is that, especially for what Norwegian is charging for it, like if you're charging, I think it's now $60 to eat in these restaurants. Teppanyaki may have been a little bit less. Someone can fact check me on that, but it's somewhere in the range of like $40 to $60. And when you're spending that much money on top of your fare, the quality needs to be, I think, substantially elevated. And I don't think that was the case. Maybe for a lesser cover charge, I might have felt a little bit more satisfied with it, but it was nothing spectacular. To me, it wasn't even anything better than what you would get at like your Pan Asian restaurant or takeout restaurant at home. But the entertainment aspect of it we thought was thoroughly enjoyable. So that was our first experience with specialty dining on the Escape. Later on in the cruise, we did Moderno, their Brazilian steakhouse. And that, I think, was actually the low point of our dining experience. What to say about Moderno? It doesn't actually have a good reason to exist. It is one of 2 steakhouses on board. I think many passengers would agree that is the inferior steakhouse. It's right next to its competition. I mean, not really competition, but it's right next to Cagney's. And, Cagney's is like, the name, when you think like specialty dining on NCL, you think Cagney's, you think Le Bistro. Moderno, there is nothing really to differentiate it from Cagney's and also like any other dining outlet that offers beef on that ship, right? Like you can get a better cut of steak in almost any other restaurant besides Moderno. There's also nothing especially Brazilian about it. The cuts of meat that we got were oversalted and seemed to have been seasoned with like store-bought, like McCormick Grill Mates kind of a thing. Which, hey, nothing against McCormick Grill Mates. Like I use it in my own kitchen, but again, it's like, does it justify the cover charge that they are imposing on passengers to eat there? In my view, absolutely not. Absolutely not. The cuts of meat were not especially great. They weren't especially tender. And again, there was nothing Brazilian about it. Like there was nothing to suggest that this was a Brazilian steakhouse, other than the fact that we got a very, very small side of chimichurri. Okay, so the Brazilian aspect of it was de minimis. And the service was, I thought, not rude, but like a little bit offhand. Just did not wow us. Not worth it, in my opinion.
I've heard this done two different ways at Moderno. I've heard that they come by and slice it off, or do they give you just a plate?
They are slicing it off. Yeah, okay. So they come out with these enormous machetes, which are very impressive. What they're supposed to do is they're supposed to adhere to like a color-coded card system. So like you have your beverage coaster has a green side and a red side. Mm-hmm. If it's green, then they're supposed to continue to come around and serve you and ask if you want more. They seem to just ignore that. Perhaps other passengers appreciated it. To each their own. It was not for us.
Do they still have a decent salad bar there, or is it strictly like caveman only type venue?
No, they do have the salad bar, and the salad bar is fine. But there's a salad bar up in the buffet.
Any other venues you hit up that were either specialty or maybe not specialty?
No, that was it for our specialty restaurants. Otherwise, we ate in the buffet for breakfast and lunch, and we did the Manhattan Room for dinner.
How was the entertainment on this 8-nighter?
Entertainment was a little bit of a letdown as well. So one of the things that there were a couple of things that we were kind of testing on this trip. A, do we like to sail a family-friendly mega ship out of the New York metropolitan area during a school holiday break? And B, do we like Norwegian's version of the mega ship? Do we like that product that they offer? Because it's a plentiful product in New York. I mean, they are, I don't know if I have like statistics to back this up, but I mean, like I every time I go into the city, I feel like I see a Norwegian ship. Like their presence there is much more than other lines. Mm-hmm. So we went in with this mentality of like, okay, are we going to enjoy what they offer? Are they going to entertain us the way that, we had been entertained on the Prima? Are they going to live up to their reputation for having some of the best entertainment offerings? And we came away with the conclusion, decidedly, no, not really. Their big show that they have is Choir of Man. Mm-hmm. Choir of Man was fine. The singers I thought were immensely talented and some of the best that we have seen on any ship. I just think that when you stack it up, I mean, compared to the fact like we saw the Donna Summer musical on the Prima, and that Norwegian, just a few short years ago had like the big brand name Broadway shows and, things that other lines just did not have. They were doing those things while other lines were doing their song and dance reviews. And the fact that they've started to kind of claw those back and Choir of Man is like what's left over is just, it felt a little bit stingy, even if the performers were good and very, very talented. Otherwise, the guest performers, I was not particularly enamored or impressed with. There was a magician, a duo comprising a magician and a contortionist. Any
comedy or music, or how was the nightlife around the ship?
Oh, it pains me to say this because the comedians I thought were just diabolical.
Oh, jeez. Why is that?
and I just not good. Like, I don't know. For me, like, I'll compare it to what we saw on the Queen Elizabeth, which has a totally different like ethos when it comes to entertainment. Totally different approach. But we had a comedian that was like all boomer humor that was not, to my taste. The crowd ate it up, but at least the comedian who was delivering it, seemed to have like a good sense of how to engage a crowd, had kind of like this very, endearing personality that people like, even if you didn't like his comedy, you liked him. That was just not the case. And I hate to say this, and I'm only saying it as a criticism because like hopefully Norwegian, takes the feedback and improves the product and maybe people liked it. I did not get the sense that they did. But it seems to me that like, okay, you're on a cruise ship with like a bunch of surly New Yorkers. Like surely there is something there. Like, come on, like go for the low hanging fruit. Like go for the jokes are many. And instead it just fell like kind of short. There wasn't like playful banter with the audience. Actually, the audience interaction was pretty minimal, I thought. So we stayed for the first comedian, and by the time the second comedian came, we just decided we were going to take our evening elsewhere.
Gotcha. And how was the nightlife?
Surprisingly quiet. And again, I don't want to seem like I'm complaining throughout this entire review, but the entertainment offerings, it doesn't seem that the programming or the facilities are like really adequate for the number of passengers. I mean, they hold north of 4,000 passengers. That theater only holds about 800.
Mm-hmm.
And the other entertainment venues are even smaller than that. So like Sid Norman's, the Comedy Club, unless you are like really on top of your scheduling and you get there with plenty of time to spare, they fill up very quickly and you can run out of luck very quickly. Otherwise, the bars stay open, to the wee hours, which, is fine for us. We like to sit around and have a drink and have some cocktails and chit chat. Of course, the casino is always open. But we found that around like 11:30, things started to kind of quiet down. Unless, of course, you were a teenager, in which case your evening was just starting. But that's a whole other can of worms.
The casino, how was it as far as the smoke situation in and around it?
I mentioned that when we got on board, everything smelled wonderful and clean, and smelled like pine sol and all kinds of like disinfectant and whatnot. It was glorious. I would say within 2 days, most of decks 7 and 8 smelled very strongly of smoke. Yeah, there's no enforcement of barriers of like this is a smoking section, this is a non-smoking section. Nobody really seems to care. There are people who are just going to the casino just to smoke and not even play.
Doesn't that ship have the little room that's non-smoking?
It does not.
No, okay.
At least not any. It's not a room with any sort of like meaningful compartmentalization. There's no like glass barrier. It's just like an annex of, and it's a pretty substantial annex too of the larger casino, where people can and do smoke.
Gotcha. And
it just wafts everywhere else.
How were the sea days as far as crowds and congestion?
Carnage. Okay, I think it's becoming very clear that like this was not the experience for me, right?
Sure.
Just coming off of like Princess and Cunard. One of the things that we let me backtrack a little bit. So we really enjoyed our experience on the Prima. We thought the Prima was a fantastic ship. But our primary complaint on the Prima was that we felt like there was no real plan B for bad weather. And this was an itinerary with a lot of sea days, more sea days than we actually anticipated because we had an itinerary change. I'll get to that later. And because it was cold sailing down to New York for those first 2 days, and then of course sailing back, everybody was inside, and it got it could get ugly at times. I will say that there was never a time where we found it difficult to get a drink at a bar, but it was just buzzing constantly, which, if you like that sort of thing, if you like a buzzing, upbeat party atmosphere, then, you would probably enjoy that. And plenty of people did enjoy that. And there were times when we felt like, this is fun and this is what we were looking for. The problem is that when you wanted to escape it, there were very, very few options to actually do that. There are very few quiet spaces. And we thought, even though this is a very big sort of party-centric, family-friendly ship, surely there might be like a small library or like a card room where we could hang out. And those spaces exist, but they were still like packed with people all the time.
So it seems like people were just searching all around the ship to find that quiet spot.
Correct. Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. What I'm about to say, I recognize will probably ruffle some feathers, but I feel like I have to say it because I was not the only person saying it on board. So sailing again during the school break, we expected that there were going to be kids and teenagers. My partner and I are teachers, right? So, if you're listening to this thinking that we're just like these child-hating millennials, no, that's not true. Like, hello, we're school teachers, okay? But there was a high proportion of tweens and teens who were rather heinous. Taking over public spaces, causing a ruckus into the wee hours, seeming to have nowhere to go and nothing to do, taking over elevators, preventing people from getting out of elevators, blockading stairwells. And most egregiously of all, in the wee hours of the night, running up and down the passenger corridors, knocking on people's doors, giggling, screaming. Yeah, it was just obnoxious. It was kind of obnoxious.
It sounds like it could be an enforcement problem with, well, it's a parenting problem, but also an enforcement problem with NCL because Carnival really puts their stake in the ground about that behavior.
Yeah. That was the conclusion that we came to as well. And I noted that in my post-cruise survey too, which was that, again, to be absolutely clear, like we knew that we were, I think we thought we understood what we were getting into, right? Family friendly line. Totally get that. Ultra casual, bring your kids. Everyone has a good time, right? We expected it would be, on the boisterous side. And for anyone who might be listening to this thinking, well, go back to Cunard or go back to Princess. Let me pose you these questions. First of all, does family friendly have to mean unrestricted and unsupervised access to all parts of the ship at all times? Because that's what it was. That's what it was. There were children sitting at bars, some often, unsupervised, and not just going up and like ordering the Shirley Temples. I mean, like parking themselves there and like taking over tables with no parents in sight. Okay, so again, family friendly. Does that have to mean total unfettered access? I counted one bar where they actually enforced an 18+ policy, and that was the District Brew House, and that's often where we would end up to play our Yahtzee and drink beer. And another thing is, like, I wonder, Norwegian, can they really claim to be catering well to families if you have, many dozens of teenagers who seem to have nothing better to do than to blockade stairways and bother people in elevators?
Yeah.
Like, what are the facilities and what is the entertainment programming, being offered to them to make sure that they have things that they actually want to do and should be doing, where they can be, away from their parents, but in a way that's like a little bit more supervised.
Let's talk about your ports of call on this 8-9er. You leave Manhattan. What was your first port of call? And give us a highlight.
Our first port of call was Port Canaveral.
Mm-hmm.
And thankfully, the best, I, as much as we enjoyed that, I think the best part was just that we had, some fair warm weather. So we docked there fairly early, and we did an excursion with NCL to Kennedy Space Center, which was a great time. We returned to the ship after a good day of exploring, and that's nice, educational experiences to be had there. And then we watched a SpaceX launch from our balcony, which was pretty special.
Awesome.
The next was Nassau. Nassau proved to be a little bit of a pleasant surprise because we did not have any plans in Nassau. We really didn't. We didn't choose this trip based on the itinerary. It's not an especially interesting itinerary. We just wanted to chase warm weather, and we wanted to sail out of New York for the convenience and also to avoid any snow-related delays and cancellations. So our plan for Nassau was to stay on the ship and try to enjoy some of the amenities, especially the pool decks and the slides. When most of the passengers would be ashore. And we thought if we were going to go ashore at all, we would just kind of wander around the port area and just kind of keep it within a couple of blocks.
Yeah.
So I got a nice massage and enjoyed the spa on board that day. But then we decided we were going to get off and wander around. And we actually found a lot of the recent developments in Nassau to be quite nice. Nothing that we really would want to... nowhere that we'd really want to spend like a lot of time in. Like, we weren't there to shop. We're not looking to go into like Diamonds International or anything like that, or go to Senor Frogs. But it was nice to just like walk along the beaches and see people, out and having a good time. Listen to a little bit of music and just sort of take in the island scenery. So you went to the spa, and Richard and I were just talking about this. Was there, or did you take advantage of any like port day specials? I tried to. I was unsuccessful. So I pre-booked.
Okay.
Because I believe in doing that. I saw a good opportunity when I got a little leaflet in the cabin that said that they were offering like a whole bunch of inclusions. Like, you get your massage, but you also get, like your cuticles trimmed, or you get like a collagen mask or some like eye or lip, all of the accoutrement kind of bundled into it for a very agreeable price. A price that was quite similar to what I had paid just for my deep tissue massage. So I went to the spa and I asked, is there any way that I can take advantage of this? And at first they told me yes, and then told me no, because it worked out to be like a $4 difference between what I had paid. I paid a slightly cheaper price than what they were offering.
Huh.
I was like, can I just pay you the $4 difference? And they told me that was not possible, which, whatever, it was fine. I guess if I want to be like really, if I really want to look for the onion in the ointment, it's like, okay, I did feel slightly punished for planning ahead and like paying them my money ahead of time so they can make interest off of it, only to find that there was actually a much better and much more inclusive price once I was on board. But not really like an experience ruiner. I still got a lot of enjoyment out of the spa.
All right, then after Nassau, where did you go?
So our next port of call was supposed to be Great Stirrup Cay, and emphasis on emphasis on it was supposed to be. That's the operative phrase, because that did not happen. We were informed by announcement from the captain shortly after we had departed Port Canaveral that we would be skipping Great Stirrup Cay because we could not undertake the tender operation because of high winds and swells. Yes. So that was disappointing because we had booked a clamshell, and I was most looking forward to just a relaxing beach day because I'm quite the beach bum. A lot of sore passengers about that. That actually didn't get under my skin too much. I mean, weather is weather, and I understand that, you sign that passenger contract, they can modify that itinerary, anytime they want to with very little or no notice. I'm aware of these things. However, what was slightly more puzzling and perturbing and really aggravated a lot of the passengers was that A, they didn't replace it, which I know is not always possible, but B, we were told that we were just going to be going directly back to New York, and we sped out of that warm weather as quickly as we possibly could.
Oh no!
I would say we were probably like off the coast of Georgia by the next day. And I was like, really, like we couldn't have done a couple of donuts in the Caribbean for a little while. So I don't know. I am not privy to all of the navigational considerations, and maybe there was some bad squall that was blowing in that we had to run away from. But would it have been nice to kind of go a little bit slower in some warm weather? Yes. Once we started to approach New York, we crawled.
Mm-hmm.
We're practically drifting back.
So then once you get back into port, how was your debark process?
So we did self-assist, and it was pretty painless. We were off the ship, I would say, in about 15 minutes.
Wow, not bad. Do they use facial recognition there?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So then you're... here we go. Any first-time tips to offer? Anyone considering Norwegian Escape?
Yes. It is, in my opinion, not really a cruise ship. It is an Atlantic City casino that happens to float. Why do I say that? Mm-hmm. Well, consider your first impressions when you walk on board a ship. For example, you walk into the Sky Princess and you have the piazza, and there might be a juggler or a cellist there, warming up, and you've got a cafe and bars and restaurants. Sends the message. What's the message? Eat, drink, be merry. Okay. When the largest room on the ship is the casino, and it is granted, I didn't, whip out my tape measure, but I'd be willing to bet you that if you got busy with your tape measure, I would be confirmed correct that the footprint of that casino is the largest room on board. I think it is larger than any of the dining rooms. It's larger than the theater. It occupies such a huge amount of that central space. You can't get anywhere on the ship without walking through it. The message is spend your money, and that's basically it, period. If you like that, listen, my partner and I, we go to Atlantic City multiple times a year, right? So if that's the kind of experience that you like, if you go to the Borgata, if you like going to like Ocean and you enjoy that, and you enjoy, lots of table games and lots of slot machines and the restaurants and entertainment that's sort of like attendant to that, you will like this experience. If you like a traditional experience, avoid. And if you are not particularly well suited to being around lots of kids, I would say avoid during, anything around a school holiday break. Yeah.
It's interesting because I am slightly fascinated with cruise ship casinos because it blows, looking at financials, just blows my mind how much money they make from the casinos on the cruise ships. And I was walking through Sun Princess when I was on the inaugural, and I counted 227 slot machines and 13 tables in the casino in that big Buffalo zone with that Buffalo slot game, but like just all over the wall and digital screens and stuff. It was like the wildest thing. It was probably one of the largest casinos I've ever seen at sea.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And again, don't get me wrong. I mean, that's my partner gambles, and so does one of our friends that we sail with. Right, they spent a lot of time in the casino. They really enjoyed it. It is, if you like casinos, it's a great one. But it's got like legs in all parts of the ship. I mean, there are slot machines in corridors, and when you think that you've reached the end of it, there's like another part of it, like another wing of the casino. So yeah, it's just not our vibe. Not our vibe.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Very nice. Well, looking back, what was the biggest highlight of this 8-nighter?
Well, it might seem like after all of these gripes and complaints that we had a bad time, but like I said, when you have a small army of very gracious and giving people who are doing their best to look after you and serve you food and clean up after you, can you really have a bad time? In my opinion, you have to really, really try hard. Highlights, we had some really excellent service. Again, like our the wait staff, just so incredibly kind and accommodating, and that classic like cruise ship service that you hear about where they remember your name immediately and they remember what you like, without you even having to tell them twice. People who are happy to stop and chat with you, just being away with friends and getting to enjoy, a small sliver of warm weather together.
Nice. Well,
so out of 8 cruises, I would probably rank it as 8, but can I really say it was all bad? No. I'm happy I went.
Let me ask you this.
Would I go again? Maybe not out of New York during school break time, but who knows? If it was the right itinerary and, the price was right, we know what to expect.
Let me ask you a couple of questions here. So More at Sea took the place of Free at Sea, and I know you sailed Prima, and that was under Free at Sea. Did you notice any major changes?
Glad you asked that, because that actually became like a small sticking point. So we were kind of confused about that because we booked this trip before More at Sea was a thing, and we were notified that our beverage package would honor the terms of the previous beverage package, which was Free at Sea. And in the materials that they sent us, there was a line that very explicitly stated, I'm like very lightly paraphrasing, like, gone is like the $15 drink limit. With very little else in the way of like clarifying detail. So when I went to order a glass of a wine that I really like, I was told that it was going to be an upcharge. And so we slightly confused by that. So we went to guest services to ask, which, by the way, without launching into too much more of a tangent, guest services, horrible location on that ship, because in the atrium, they always have like a big band or like music playing and you have to shout at people. So they are not the happiest of people. But the explanation we got was basically they had lowered the price threshold per drink from 15 to 12, but they had included more drinks in that $12 window.
Gotcha.
I actually don't really understand that. But that's the best explanation they were able to provide for us. Otherwise, the rest of the package was fine. It was everything that you got with Free at Sea. So we got the 150 minutes of Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi, by the way, awful. That app, abysmal. especially when it's going to be so central to the experience. Totally unusable the entire trip. And not just for me, for like every passenger I encountered. But bringing it back to more at sea, don't fully understand the differences, but it didn't really matter very much to us.
You know, this reminds me of like the Wi-Fi giving you allotted minutes reminds me of like when I was sailing in 2011, I guess. And Carnival would give me a voucher to upload my show from the ship. And it would be like, you know, you have 300 minutes here, but it's like, okay, that was 12 years ago, or right. I guess that was 12 years ago. Look at it. We're 2025 now. We shouldn't be doing allotted minutes, especially with how cheap Starlink is. I mean, I have Starlink. I love it. And it's super affordable, super cheap. That's why all the cruise lines are moving to it. It just seems like it's a money grab at this point.
Yeah. Oh, a shameless money grab. Shameless money grab. And I will just admit, like, I'm a little bit of a Luddite when it comes to tech on vacation. I like to unplug. I mean, my job requires me to be very accessible and plugged in, so I relish any opportunity to not be. And I felt like I couldn't even do the basic things. Like, I should be able to check the daily program on the app. When I say I couldn't use the app at all, I mean I could not use the app at all. Like, even when I was logged into the Wi-Fi and using my minutes, the app was completely unusable. It was nothing but an error screen the whole time. Even for people in my traveling party who had a little bit better luck with the app, it did not do anything that it needed to. And crucially, it does not have an inter-passenger chat feature. So if you wanted to communicate with anybody in your party, you either had to, set up a time to meet them at a certain place, or you had to use your Wi-Fi minutes, not to text, because, like iMessage and text messaging didn't work. You have to use WhatsApp. It was like a lot of pressure to upgrade your package for better unlimited Wi-Fi, which I wasn't going to do, so I didn't.
Okay, that's fair. And then how was the value for what you paid for the cruise?
Keeping in mind that we paid very, very little for this cruise because we got a really nice casinos at sea incentive. I really cannot. I probably sound very spoiled in the complaining that I am doing. But for people who are paying, Norwegian is not the cheapest option out there, especially when you consider what premium lines are doing, like Princess. We can get a cheaper Princess cruise with the Princess Premier that is, much more inclusive of many more amenities for a much nicer experience. Granted, it is missing some of the big theatrics and bells and whistles. But I think the core elements of that experience, like the core elements that make a cruise experience really great, are so much stronger for a much better price on a line like Princess than they are on Norwegian. I get that those value lines, their whole business model is get you in for a good price and then we charge for everything. I don't quite recall what our price would have been if we had paid, without the casino promotion, but it was somewhere in the ballpark of like $1,600 to $1,700 for a balcony. It was not cheap. And we just thought, even with the free at sea or more at sea benefits, the specialty dining it did not live up to the surcharge. The Wi-Fi, very poor. I would sort of take my business elsewhere.
Fair enough. And your final thoughts of Norwegian Escape?
Atlantic City at sea, if that's your bag, go for it. You have a great time.
We've been talking with John about his 8-night sailing on a Norwegian Escape out of Manhattan. John, a lot to unpack there, my friend, and you did a good job at it. So I appreciate you, and thanks for sharing your vacation experience with us.
Anytime, Doug. Thank you for the time.
All right, Dougie, let's see what we got for you, buddy. Cruise Radio is produced at the tripinsurance.com studios in Jacksonville, Florida. Get cruise news, ship reviews, and money-saving tips every Thursday on Cruise Radio. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the show. If you want to help spread the word, give Cruise Radio a 5-star review. Find Cruise Radio where you listen to your favorite podcast or online at cruiseradio.net. I'm your announcer,